The chilly wind swept through Willow Creek, carrying whispers of shock and disbelief. The townspeople gathered in the square, their breath visible in the frosty air. Victor Hargrove, once a beacon of success and respect, had vanished without a trace. "Did you hear?" a woman said, clutching her shawl. "He left Alicia behind, and she's about to give birth." As the murmurs grew louder, Sarah, the town's veterinarian, stood at the edge of the crowd, her heart heavy at the thought of the mare struggling alone. Alicia had always been a symbol of grace and strength, and now she faced abandonment. How could he do this? Sarah thought, her mind racing. She felt a pull toward the mare, sensing the pain of neglect that mirrored her own feelings of helplessness. "Victor was a good man," an elderly man spoke up. "But this is unforgivable." Sarah's chest tightened. How could she reconcile the man who had once helped so many with the man who had left Alicia to fend for herself? What about the mare? She wanted to shout. What about her suffering? With winter fast approaching, Sarah knew the urgency of the situation. Alicia needed care, and she needed it now. The weight of Victor's actions pressed heavily on her shoulders, but she couldn't stand by while Alicia struggled. "I have to help her," she murmured to herself, determination rising within her. "No matter the cost." The townspeople continued to debate. Some called for justice, demanding Victor face consequences for his actions. Others argued for mercy, recalling the good he had done. "He deserves a chance to explain himself," a young man said, shaking his head. "We can't just cast him out." "Hey all," Sarah felt torn. Should she pursue legal action against Victor, or should she focus solely on Alicia? Her heart ached at the thought of taking a stand against someone who had once been a hero. What if he comes back, she thought. What if he tries to make things right? But the image of Alicia, lonely and scared, haunted her. As the crowd began to disperse, Sarah noticed Henry, the local farmer, watching her with concern. "You look troubled," he said, stepping closer. "Is it about Alicia?" "Yes," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. "I can't just leave her like this. Someone has to care for her." "I'll help you," Henry offered without hesitation. "We can figure this out together." Gratitude washed over Sarah. In that moment, she felt a bond forming, not just over their shared love for animals, but over their mutual understanding of loss and longing. But even as they discussed plans for Alicia, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something more was at stake. Would Victor return? And if he did, what would that mean for her, for Alicia, and for the entire town? As snowflakes began to fall, she knew one thing for certain. Time was running out. Alicia needed her, and Sarah was determined to fight for her survival, no matter what lay ahead. As the days passed in Willow Creek, Sarah found herself lost in thought. The weight of Victor's abandonment hung heavy in her heart, and she struggled to decide what to do next. The townspeople had divided opinions about Victor's actions, and Sarah felt the pressure from both sides. Some wanted justice for Alicia, while others wanted to give Victor a chance to explain himself. Sarah spent her nights at her clinic, worrying about Alicia. The mare was in pain, and Sarah knew that the clock was ticking. With winter approaching, resources were limited, and Alicia needed care. Every time Sarah looked into the mare's eyes, she felt a deep connection. She wanted to help, but the thought of taking legal action against Victor troubled her. Is it right to punish someone who once did so much good? She wondered. Flashbacks of Victor's past filled her mind. She remembered how he had donated to local charities, helped build the community center, and even rescued animals in need. He was once a hero, a man everyone admired. Now he was a ghost, leaving behind only shame and regret. Sarah felt conflicted. How could someone so noble turn his back on a creature that depended on him? In the quiet moments, Sarah wrote notes to herself, trying to organize her thoughts. "Help Alicia," she wrote at the top, followed by "decide about Victor." But every time she tried to put her thoughts on paper, her mind wandered back to the once great man and the kindness he had shown. Is there still a chance for redemption? She asked herself. As she pondered these heavy thoughts, Sarah sought comfort in her friend Henry. He had been a steady presence in her life, always ready to lend a hand. One evening, as they worked together to gather supplies for Alicia, Sarah opened up about her dilemma. "I don't know if I should take action against Victor," she admitted, her voice shaky. "What if he wants to come back and make things right?" Henry paused, looking at her with understanding. "You have to do what feels right for you, Sarah. Alicia needs care, and that should be your focus. But if Victor returns, you can decide then." His words brought her some comfort, but they also stirred a fear within her. What if Victor didn't care at all? What if he never returned? The townspeople continued to talk, and Sarah could hear their voices drifting through her window. Some wanted to gather a petition to demand answers from Victor, while others urged mercy. "Let him explain," they argued. Sarah felt the tension building in her chest. She wished they could see the mare's suffering, rather than arguing over Victor's fate. As winter tightened its grip on Willow Creek, Sarah made a decision. She would focus on Elysia and give her the care she needed. In the quiet hours, she visited Elysia daily, bringing her food and comfort. With Henry by her side, they worked tirelessly to ensure the mare's well-being. Their bond grew stronger with every passing day, fueled by their shared mission. Yet, even as she poured her heart into helping Elysia, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty. The shadows of Victor's past loomed large, and she knew that the community's divided opinions would soon come to a head. Would they demand justice, or would they offer forgiveness? And what would she do if Victor returned? As snowflakes began to fall gently outside, Sarah felt a sense of urgency. Time was running out, and Elysia needed her more than ever. With a deep breath, she vowed to stay strong, ready to face whatever challenges awaited her and the mare she had come to love. As winter settled over Willow Creek, the air grew colder, and the snow began to blanket the town. The chill seeped into Sarah's bones as she made her way to the clinic each day. She looked out at the fields, now covered in white, and thought about Elysia. The mare's health was worsening, and Sarah felt a heavy weight on her heart. Each visit felt more urgent than the last. Elysia needed her, but resources were dwindling, and Sarah often worried about how she would keep the mare alive through the harsh winter. Inside the barn, Sarah found Elysia lying down, her breathing shallow and labored. Sarah knelt beside her, gently stroking the mare's neck. "I promise to take care of you, Elysia," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. She had been doing everything she could, but the stress was starting to take its toll. There were nights when she lay awake, wondering if she had the strength to keep fighting for the mare's life. Henry was a constant presence by her side. He arrived each morning with supplies, his hands always ready to help. Together, they created a routine to care for Elysia. They would check her food, clean her stall, and offer her comfort. As they worked together, the bond between Sarah and Henry deepened. They shared laughter, stories, and moments of silence, united in their mission to help the mare. Still, Sarah could see the worry in Henry's eyes. He knew how much Elysia meant to her. Despite their efforts, the days grew darker, and Sarah began to feel overwhelmed. She often asked herself if she was doing enough. "What if I can't save her?" she thought, feeling tears prick at her eyes. The emotional strain weighed heavily on her, and she started to doubt her abilities. Each time she looked at Elysia, she saw not just a horse in need, but a reflection of her own fears and insecurities. One evening, as they took a break from their work, a letter arrived for Sarah. The postmark was from a city far away. Sarah's heart raced as she opened it, her hands trembling slightly. What could it be? As she read the words, a flicker of hope ignited within her. It was from Victor. Victor's letter revealed his feelings of deep remorse for leaving Elysia behind. He spoke of the mare's rare lineage and the potential for a bright future if she received the right care. As Sarah read, her heart swelled with a mix of hope and confusion. Victor expressed a desire to return to Willow Creek, to make amends for his past mistakes. "Maybe he wants to help," Sarah whispered to Henry, her voice trembling. But at the same time, doubts crept in. Could she trust Victor after what he had done? Would he truly care for Elysia? Or was this just empty talk? Henry watched her closely, sensing the whirlwind of emotions within her. "It's a lot to take in, Sarah. You need to think about what this means for you and Elysia," he said softly. His support meant the world to her, but Sarah felt torn. Part of her wanted to believe in Victor's sincerity, while another part remained wary. As the snow continued to fall outside, Sarah sat in the barn with Elysia, the letter still clutched in her hands. She looked down at the struggling mare, who seemed to sense her presence. "I won't give up on you," she promised, her voice steady once more. The road ahead would be difficult, but for Elysia's sake, she resolved to stay strong. She would face whatever challenges awaited her, with or without Victor's help. The struggles of winter were far from over, but Sarah's determination to protect Elysia burned bright. As Sarah sat in the dim light of the barn, the letter from Victor felt heavy in her hands. She had read it several times, each word echoing in her mind. Victor spoke of his regret and sorrow for abandoning Elysia, and he shared details about the mare's rare lineage. According to Victor, Elysia came from a long line of champions, and he believed that, with proper care, She could thrive and even give birth to a foal with great potential. The idea filled Sarah with a mix of hope and uncertainty. Could it be true? She wondered aloud, glancing at Alicia, who lay quietly in her stall. The mare's eyes seemed to hold a flicker of awareness, as if she too was waiting for a sign of what was to come. Sarah felt a strong desire to believe in Victor's words, but doubts gnawed at her heart. She had witnessed the pain Alicia had endured since Victor's departure. Could she trust that he truly wanted to make amends? As Sarah mulled over the letter, Henry entered the barn, his boots crunching softly on the straw-covered floor. He noticed the troubled look on Sarah's face and approached her. "What's wrong?" he asked gently, concern etched on his features. Sarah handed him the letter, watching as he read Victor's words. Henry's brow furrowed as he reached the end. "He sounds sincere," he said slowly. "But you have to be careful. People can say anything when they want forgiveness." His voice was steady, but Sarah could see the worry in his eyes. Henry had always been honest with her, and she appreciated his perspective. "I know," Sarah replied, her voice low. "But what if he really wants to help? Alicia deserves a second chance, just like anyone else." "Ria." Henry nodded, but he still looked troubled. "It's not just about Alicia. It's about you too, Sarah. You've invested so much in her. What if Victor comes back and things don't change?" "Deo." Sarah felt the weight of his words. The thought of Victor returning stirred a whirlwind of emotions within her. She longed to believe in his potential for change, but the fear of disappointment loomed large. "I just don't know what to do," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "Follow your heart," Henry suggested, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "But also listen to your instincts. You need to protect yourself and Alicia." Prowl. As they stood together in the barn, Sarah felt torn. Henry's support was a lifeline, yet the pull of Victor's letter lingered in her mind. Could she find it in her heart to forgive him? And if she did, what would that mean for Alicia? The snow continued to fall outside, blanketing Willow Creek in silence. Inside the barn, the atmosphere was thick with uncertainty. Sarah turned her focus back to Alicia, who looked up at her with trusting eyes. "I won't give up on you," Sarah whispered, determined to stay strong for the mare. But as she contemplated Victor's return, she knew that her decision would impact not just Alicia's fate, but also her own heart. Would she be able to open herself up to the possibility of forgiveness, or would the fear of betrayal hold her back? The weight of the choice hung heavy in the air, and Sarah realized that whatever path she chose, it would not be easy. The struggles of winter were far from over, and the promise of spring felt distant. Yet, for Alicia and the chance at a brighter future, Sarah resolved to face the storm ahead. A fierce snowstorm swept through Willow Creek, blanketing the town in thick white layers. The wind howled outside, rattling the barn where Sarah and Alicia sought refuge. Inside, the air was tense with anticipation. Sarah knew that Alicia was close to giving birth, and she felt a mix of excitement and fear. As the storm raged on, Sarah could not ignore the growing sense of urgency. Suddenly, a loud knock echoed through the barn door. Sarah's heart raced as she opened it to find Victor, his face flushed from the cold. He stood there, soaked and shivering, but his eyes burned with determination. "I came to help," he said breathlessly. His appearance shocked Sarah. She had not expected him to arrive so soon, especially in such terrible weather. The townspeople had been divided in their opinions about Victor, but now, as he stood before her, it was clear he was ready to confront his past mistakes. He stepped inside, shaking off the snow, and Sarah felt a strange mix of relief and skepticism. Could this really be the same man who had abandoned Alicia? "I know I messed up," Victor said, his voice steady despite the storm. "I want to make things right. Please, let me help with Alicia." His sincerity was evident, but Sarah's doubts lingered. She remembered the pain Alicia had suffered and the community's anger toward Victor. Could he truly be trusted? As the wind howled outside, the barn became a sanctuary for new beginnings. Sarah glanced at Alicia, who seemed to sense the change in atmosphere. The mare shifted restlessly, and Sarah felt a surge of hope. "Okay," she said slowly, "but you must understand that Alicia needs our full attention." Victor nodded eagerly, stepping forward to help. Together, they gathered the necessary supplies, working side by side in the dim light of the barn. Each movement was filled with purpose, and Sarah felt a spark of camaraderie growing between them. Victor took charge, guiding Sarah with confidence as they prepared for the birth. As the minutes turned into hours, the storm outside intensified. The howling wind seemed to mirror the storm of emotions brewing inside Sarah. She had watched Victor fall from grace, and now she was witnessing his attempt to rise again. The townspeople might not forgive him so easily, But perhaps this was a step toward redemption. Finally, the moment arrived. Alicia began to show signs of labor, and Sarah and Victor rushed to her side. Together, they encouraged the mare, their hearts racing in unison. "You can do it, Alicia," Sarah whispered, her voice filled with warmth. She felt Victor's presence beside her, a reminder that they were in this together. As Alicia gave one final push, the barn filled with the sound of new life. A healthy foal emerged, taking its first breath amid the chaos of the storm. Sarah's heart swelled with joy, and she looked at Victor, who wore a look of awe. In that moment, the doubts that had clouded her mind began to fade. The townspeople, watching from a distance, were taken aback. They had expected Victor to hide away in shame. But here he was, shoulder to shoulder with Sarah, helping to bring new life into the world. It challenged their preconceived notions of forgiveness and second chances. As the foal lay beside its mother, Victor turned to Sarah, his expression earnest. "I want to be better," he said softly. "For Alicia, for this foal, and for you." Sarah felt the weight of his words. The storm outside continued to rage, but inside the barn, a sense of calm began to settle. She realized that redemption was not just about Victor. It was about the community, Alicia, and the future they could build together. Watching the foal take its first steps, Sarah knew that the path ahead would not be easy. But with Victor's presence and the promise of new beginnings, she felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, they could weather the storm together. As the first light of dawn broke through the storm clouds, the barn was filled with a warm glow. Alicia lay peacefully beside her foal, who was now nursing contentedly. Sarah's heart swelled with joy at the sight. The miracle of life had arrived, and it felt like a beacon of hope in the midst of the harsh winter. The townspeople began to gather outside the barn, drawn by the news of Alicia's new foal. They whispered among themselves, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Victor stood beside Sarah, his presence both comforting and challenging. This was his chance to prove that he could change. Sarah took a deep breath and stepped outside to face the crowd. The faces of her neighbors were familiar, yet the tension in the air was palpable. "Everyone, I want you to meet Alicia's foal," she called out, her voice steady. As she spoke, she noticed Victor's anxious expression. He was stepping into the spotlight, ready to confront the community that had once revered him. The townspeople approached cautiously, their eyes drawn to the foal. It was small but strong, its coat gleaming in the morning light. Sarah felt a surge of pride. "This little one symbolizes new beginnings for all of us," she said, her heart full of hope. Victor stood beside her, and Sarah could feel his nervous energy. "I know I have made mistakes," he began, his voice clear and strong. "But I am here to make things right. I want to help Alicia and her foal. I want to be part of this community again." His words hung in the air, met with a mixture of silence and murmurs. Some townspeople exchanged skeptical glances, while others began to soften. Sarah watched as the crowd slowly shifted, their hearts opening to the possibility of forgiveness. It was not easy, but the sight of the foal, so full of life, sparked something within them. As the townspeople approached the barn, Sarah felt the weight of the moment. She turned to Victor, who was watching the group with a hint of fear in his eyes. "You can do this," she whispered, offering him a reassuring smile. He nodded, taking a step forward. The crowd gathered around, their eyes filled with wonder as they saw the foal for the first time. Victor knelt down, reaching out a hand to touch the foal gently. "You are beautiful," he said softly, a smile spreading across his face. In that moment, it became clear that he was sincere in his desire to change. Sarah joined Victor, and together they introduced the foal to the townspeople. As they shared stories of Alicia's strength and the journey they had all been on, the atmosphere began to shift. The initial anger and resentment slowly faded, replaced by a growing sense of unity and compassion. Victor looked at Sarah, gratitude shining in his eyes. They shared a moment of understanding, realizing that they were both on a path toward healing. "Thank you for believing in me," he said quietly, and she nodded, feeling the bond between them deepen. As the sun rose higher, illuminating the barn and the new foal, Sarah knew that this was just the beginning. The townspeople began to talk among themselves, discussing how they could support Alicia and her foal together. There was a sense of community forming, a realization that they could all move forward together. In the midst of the crowd, Sarah felt a newfound sense of purpose. She looked at the foal, then at Victor, and felt hope blossoming within her. This was a new beginning, not just for Alicia and her foal, but for the entire community of Willow Creek. They had all weathered the storm, and now they could embrace the promise of a brighter future together. As the winter thaw began, the sun shone brightly over Willow Creek, bringing warmth and light back to the town. The air felt fresh, filled with the promise of spring. Sarah watched as Alicia and her foal grazed peacefully in the field, their bond strong and beautiful. The sight filled her heart with joy and hope. The townspeople gathered at the barn to celebrate the new life that had come into the world. They brought food and drinks, laughter echoing through the air. It felt like a festival, a time to come together and share in the joy of Alicia's foal. Sarah smiled as she watched her neighbors interact, their faces lit up with happiness. Victor stood at the edge of the crowd, a mix of nervousness and determination in his eyes. He had taken the first steps to rebuild his reputation, attending every town meeting and helping with community tasks. Today was a crucial moment for him, as he wanted to show everyone that he was sincere in his efforts to change. "Let's gather around," Sarah called out, her voice clear and inviting. The townspeople turned to her, their attention focused. "I know we have all faced challenges, but today is special. We have a new member in our community." She gestured toward the foal, who frolicked in the grass, full of energy and life. As the crowd moved closer, Victor took a deep breath and stepped forward. "I want to thank all of you for being here," he said, his voice steady. "I know I have made mistakes, and I hurt many of you, but I promise to work hard to earn your trust again. I want to help this community," starting with Alicia and her foal. Some townspeople exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond, but slowly, a few began to nod, their expressions softening. Sarah felt a sense of relief wash over her. She knew that healing would take time, but today was a step in the right direction. The foal, curious and playful, approached Victor. He knelt down, extending his hand. "You are going to be something special, aren't you?" he said, his voice filled with warmth. The foal nuzzled his hand, and a wave of affection swept over the crowd. They began to see Victor in a new light, recognizing his sincerity. "Together, we can create a better future," Sarah added, her voice encouraging. "Alicia and her foal remind us of the power of new beginnings. Let's support each other as we move forward." As the townspeople cheered, Sarah felt a sense of unity forming. They were not just celebrating the foal, they were also celebrating forgiveness and the chance for a fresh start. Victor's presence among them was a sign of hope, a reminder that anyone could change. The day continued with laughter, stories, and shared memories. Sarah watched as Victor engaged with the townsfolk, slowly breaking down the walls that had once divided them. His journey toward redemption was just beginning, but today marked an important milestone. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Sarah stood beside Victor. "Thank you for being brave today," she said softly. He smiled, a genuine expression of gratitude on his face. "I couldn't have done it without you," he replied, his voice filled with appreciation. They shared a moment of understanding, realizing that their paths were now intertwined, with the foal bounding nearby, symbolizing hope and resilience. The community of Willow Creek felt renewed. Together, they embraced the possibility of change, love, and a brighter future. The journey was just beginning, but they were ready to face it together, united by the bonds of forgiveness and the spirit of community. Share this story if you believe that forgiveness can pave the way for new beginnings. Leave a comment about a moment when you chose to give someone a second chance, and subscribe for more inspiring tales like this one.